Hey, what's good, y'all? It's Stinger, and today I'm going to be showing each and every one of you how you can make a jrock / Japanese rock / anime opening theme type beat. I've been sitting on this beat for a long time because it is one of my favorite pieces of music that I've made to date, but I wanted to get to a point where I felt like my content was professional enough to display this piece of music. And now that I'm at a point where I believe that is so, I can finally break down this beat, and I am super stoked. But enough yapping. The beat that we're going to be going over today sounds a little something like this. Alright, so the breakdown in this tutorial is going to be a little bit different than my previous tutorials. Instead of breaking down the melody, the drums, the 808s like I would in like a simple trap beat, for this I'm going to be breaking it down in terms of arrangement chunks. So first I'll break down the intro, then the build-up, then the chorus, then the verse, so on and so forth. So with that being said, the first thing that we're going to cover is the intro. And for our intro, we have one single melodic component, and that is going to be Addictive Keys on the Studio Grand preset. And I just have this playing this insane MIDI from my guy Warheart. Warheart, in my opinion, is genuinely one of the most talented MIDI makers in the game right now. He makes a lot of plug and B and hyperpop type MIDIs, but what's cool about the plug and B MIDIs is that they can also be transferable to jrock. So the one that I pulled here is originally a plug and B MIDI, but as you're gonna hear, his MIDIs are pretty versatile. Now, I'm not just gonna say how to make a jrock type beat and then say use a MIDI. While that is what I did here, I'm going to break down what makes this MIDI special. The first notable aspect of this melody is the chord progression that it uses. And that is the 4-5-3-6, aka Royal Road chord progression. The Royal Road progression is not only just common in jrock, but all types of Japanese music. So if you want a safe chord progression to use for these kind of genres, remember 4-5-3-6. But wait, that progression is just used for the first half of the MIDI. The next half of the MIDI is where things get interesting. It starts off with the 4 chord progression going from the 4 to the 5 to the flat 6 to the 3. And this flat 6 literally makes this MIDI what it is. Incorporating out of scale notes for these kind of beats is almost essential because the dissonance that comes from that chromaticism is something that is heard in a ton of jrock. And the flat 6 is a super safe bet. So like I said, 4, 5, flat 6, 3. And then the last 2 chords are going to be the 6. And then at the end, to give the melody a little bit of resolution, it ends with the 1 being A sharp. Now, outside of the chord progression, all you really need to keep in mind is to use big chords. Use 7ths, use 9ths, use 11ths. And don't be afraid to use any diminished chords as well. Like I said, chromaticism and off-scale notes are perfect for these type of beats. So yeah, as long as you're using the Royal Road progression, you have some kind of chromaticism, whether it be in the root notes or in the main melody itself, and you're using big chords like 7ths and 9ths, you should get an amazing product. So with that being said, this is what our intro melody sounds like. Now, aside from the melody and the intro, there's only one more thing to cover, and that is going to be the use of tempo automation. The first time I saw somebody use tempo automation was from Azali, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, on YouTube. He has some amazing videos where he just shows his beats, and they're just freaking incredible. And this tempo automation is used to give that piano melody a little bit of realism. It makes it so it's not perfectly quantized. The tempo just flows as the melody goes. So with that being said, this is what our intro sounds like with that tempo automation. As you can tell, we have a super atmospheric intro that sets the precedent of our main melody for this beat. And with that being said, now that we're done with the intro, let's go over the build-up. For our build-up, the first melodic component that I throw down is this electric piano from Analog Lab, and I have it playing the exact same melody as our Addictive Keys piano. The next thing that I threw down after that is going to be this Sine lead from Serum. And this isn't saying that you have to do this, but in order to get the sound that I achieved, make sure you put on mono and legato on the voicing. Basically, mono makes it so that only one note can play at a time, and legato gives a little slide between those notes. And for this Sine lead, I have it playing a super fast and erratic lead pattern. I've gone over leads a ton in the past in my videos, but I'm gonna briefly explain my process here. I like to start off my leads with a note from the current chord that is playing at that moment. So the first chord that plays is a D♯7 add 9, and our Sine lead starts with the D being the 9 of the chord. Usually from placing down one note, I'll be able to hear which note I want to go with next. So from there, I'll just map out the rest of my lead. And then in my leads, I like to have some overlapping notes and some strum notes to make use of that legato. And I also like to play around with note length to give the lead a little bit more character. So yeah, to summarize leads, start with a note from the chord, build upon that note, and use strum notes and overlapping notes to make use of that legato. So with that being said, this is what our lead sounds like. After that lead, I threw down this violin from BBC Symphonic Orchestra, and I just have it playing the fifths of each chord that's playing at the moment, and I have it in a higher octave to introduce those high strings that are so iconic in these kind of beats. And the final melodic component of note that I'm going to cover in the intro is going to be this bass. The bass that I chose to use was the Finger E Bass 4 from Xenology. And as you can tell here, I don't just have it playing one long note on the root notes. I have it playing a super rhythmic pattern that goes along with the melody. And aside from that, something that I like to do is lead into the next note that I'm going to be going to. So right here, I know I'm going to end up on this D sharp because that's the root note of the chord at the moment. So I just build a descending staircase pattern sticking to the scale. And then I do something similar here as well. So with that being said, this is what our bass line sounds like. And aside from that, I just have down that same addictive keys pattern from the intro, as well as this background layer pad that really isn't interesting enough to go over. And then aside from the melody, I just have a few risers and impacts to build some suspense in the beat. And the final portion of the buildup is going to be this pause. So the first 8 bars of our buildup is just these melodic components. But after those 8 bars, I give the beat a little bit of room to breathe, and in turn of doing so, build suspense for the chorus. And to lead into the chorus, I have yet another riser, as well as this little rim shot pattern. So with that being said, with everything all together, this is what our buildup sounds like. So now that we've covered the build-up, we can go over my favorite part of this beat, being the chorus. The first part of the chorus that I want to go over is this electric guitar from Ample Metal Eclipse. And for this electric guitar, I have 2 instances. The first instance is just a normal regular electric guitar, and the second instance has the palm mute enabled. And you'll see why in a second. So for our first just normal guitar, I have a pretty simple pattern laid out based off of our original MIDI. So basically all of these chords are comprised of 3 things: the root note, the 5th of that chord, and the root note put up by an octave. And that's basically all it is for most of these. Aside from that, it's just playing a pretty simple rhythm following both our original melody and the bass line. So with that being said, this is what the first instance of the guitar sounds like. Now, what the second instance of our guitar does is fill in all of this dead space in between this first pattern. And all it's doing is playing those same chords and using a 2-step rhythm. And this is what it sounds like with both of those guitars put together. Now, aside from that rhythm guitar, I also have down a lead guitar. Yet again, this is coming from Ample Metal Eclipse, and it's playing the same pattern that our Sine lead was playing in the buildup. By reintroducing that melody, but in a different way, we're building a theme in this beat, which gives the listener something to remember it by. So with that being said, this is what it sounds like. Not the most realistic sounding guitar, but it's fine. We're working with what we got. And the final thing of note that I threw in for the chorus is going to be some drums from SSD Sampler 5. This is a free VST that I use for pretty much all of my acoustic drums because it's just super intuitive and sounds great when you mix it right. And for the drums, I have it playing a pretty simple pattern. Up here are the hi-hats, and I just have it playing a pretty basic two-step with some velocity variation to give it some realism. Down here, I have a kick and a snare playing a pretty basic like punk rock-esque pattern. And then right here, I introduce some breaks in the drums that correspond with that 4-chord change in our melody. And what I do for that is I have the kick hitting, and then I also have an open hat being quickly cut off. So if you play the drums in real life, you know it's the psst. And then I also have a crash hitting on all 4 of those beats. So with that being said, this is what these drums sound like. And then for the chorus, I have 2 separate drum patterns. The first one is the one that I just played, and the second one is nearly identical, but it introduces a little fill. And then aside from that, I just have a pretty basic bass line being played, nothing to go over there. And then I also have our electric piano from the build-up. So with that being said, this is what our chorus sounds like. And I'm gonna play a little bit of the build-up too, just to show the effect of the build-up. So now that we've covered the chorus, let's go over the verse. In our verse, the only melodies that are playing are the electric piano, the sine lead, our bass line, and our addictive keys piano. I took the electric guitar out for this part because not only does it make it a little bit more chill and bring down the vibe a bit, but it also makes our second chorus more impactful when the guitars are reintroduced. Aside from that, I just have our drums playing a relatively simple pattern that's very similar to our chorus. And for these drum patterns, as you can see, it's number 22, 23, 24, and that is because I am changing the drum pattern every 8 bars. Because in a real track made with real drums, the drummer isn't going to play the same thing every 8 bars. As a former drummer myself, I know I would incorporate some fills, maybe use some different drums, you know. I wouldn't just play the same thing over and over and over again. So to give our beat a little bit of realism and also just make it a little bit more interesting, I change the drum pattern every 8 bars. And the changes that I do are small, like I just cut out a little bit right here and do a fill. And then for this one, I do the same thing, but I introduce a fill at the end. So yeah, nothing much to be said about the verse. The only things that are notable is that I cut some parts of the melody out and that I changed the drum pattern and continue to change it every 8 bars. So with that being said, this is what a portion of our verse sounds like. So now that we've covered the verse, let's go over our second buildup. So our second buildup is very similar to our first one. All of the melodic components are the same. We have the electric piano, the sine lead, the high piano, the bass line, the keys, the pad, all that kind of stuff. But to build even more suspense for our second drop, I introduced some very snare heavy buildup drums. This just builds that energy until our second chorus, and all that energy is just released. And I think this is just a groove that I pulled in from SSD Sampler. So this is what our buildup drums sound like. And just like our first buildup, I have that 2-bar break, but instead of just that basic rim, I threw down this super sick drum fill. And that really just assists with building that tension, which makes people, or maybe just me, excited for the second chorus. So with that being said, this is what our second buildup sounds like. And now we can go over the final part of our beat being the second chorus. So the things that are the same from the first chorus to the second chorus are the electric guitar, the electric piano, that bass line, and that lead guitar. But one thing that is different is that I introduced some melody cuts. This not only makes our second chorus a little bit more unique, but also gives the beat a little bit of breathing room. The second thing that's different from the first chorus to the second chorus is going to be the drum patterns. And they're not vastly different, it still follows the same basic rhythm. But for these, I throw in some frequent drum fills just to really emphasize the energy of the second chorus. chorus. And as always, the first 8 bars and the next 8 bars are different drum patterns. And the final thing that's different about the chorus is something that I don't even know why I decided to do it, but I'm glad I did, is I rendered out our guitar pattern, pitched it up by an octave, and then I only have it playing for the last portion of our chorus. Don't know why I decided to do it, but I'm glad I did because it sounds so cool. And then finally, to close out our song, I just have a little abrupt drum stomp. So with that being said, this is what the second chorus, along with a little bit of the second build-up, sound like together. So yeah, with that all being said, that is how you make a jrock type beat. I know this tutorial was probably super long because this recording is super long. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. Also consider checking out my Patreon where I post the FLPs to all of my beats in all of my videos, including this one. So if you wanted to study the arrangement, the mixing, the mastering, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. So if you wanted to study the arrangement, the mixing, the mastering, the melody, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. And finally, consider subscribing as I post 1 tutorial a week sometimes and 2 sound kits a month. Other than that, that's gonna be it. Peace.